Okay, you ready?
Ready.
All right. All right. Senate Bill 133. Are you going to do it? Oh.
Senate Bill 133 is the Local Tax Relief for Working Families Act of 2021. This is the bill that would allow the counties to implement a progressive income tax, so implement their tax on a bracketed basis with different rates. We discussed this a little bit last week. The bill where we left off struck provisions that were in the bill that would allow the counties to go to 3.5%. So the counties would still be capped at what is the current income tax cap of 3.2%. It brings up the bottom rate from 1% to 2.25%. As a reminder, nobody's below 2.25% at this point. And then it strikes corresponding provisions in the back that would have that addressed issues related to going above 3.2%, since that part's out of the bill. Is that the bill as, I think you need to look at the, yeah, look at the reprint on your desk would have the provisions struck that relate to 3.5%. There were questions related to the disparity grant that were raised, because the disparity grant contemplates counties having a set tax rate as opposed to multiple tax rates. So the interested parties worked out a compromise that would apply the disparity grant, calculate the disparity grant, contemplating multiple tax rates on the county's parts. That amendment is in the reprint. Basically, it tries to approximate, using the $100,000 mark, the flat rate. So the multipliers that apply to the flat rate kick in at 2.6 or 2.8%. There's a 20% multiplier on the disparity grant. For purposes of the new progressive tax, all rates would have to be at 2.8% to get that multiplier. No counties currently fall into that category. There's a 40% calculation. Here, it's for counties that have a flat rate. If your flat rate falls between 3% and 3.2%, then you get the 40%. For the new criteria for the counties that would have multiple rates or a progressive income tax, here it would be if your tax rate on income under $100,000 is at least 2.9%, and your tax rate on income over $100,000 is at least 3%, you would be eligible for that 40% calculation. And then finally, the top bracket, the 70. Finally, the top bracket, or the top multiplier, the 75%. That's for anybody who has a rate of at least 3.2% for flat rate counties. If you're a county that has multiple rates, your income tax rate on income under $100,000 needs to be at least 3.1%, and your income tax rate on income over $100,000 needs to be 3.2%. And I'm sure that was clear as mud.
Let me ask one thing first. Is there anything in this that can be conceived to lower the tax rate without any action on any citizens? Without any action.
Anybody.
Right. Do you understand my question?
So that you're asking if there would need to be another action taken before taxes could be lowered?
Yes.
Yes, there would need to be another action by a local governmental entity in order for taxes to be lowered under this bill.
And in the same token, could they be raised without an action?
No.
Okay. Senator Griffith.
Thank you. I just had a quick question, Mr. Chairman. It was in the description, you said the parties had worked, kind of worked things out. Could you help me remember who the parties were that were?
So Anne Arundel County was very interested in this bill, and MACO obviously, because it represents the counties, were interested in this bill, and the Anne Arundel County doesn't receive anything under the disparity grant, so they didn't want to speak for the disparity grant counties, I think, when working out the amendment. So MACO has been involved in addressing the amendment to try and come up with a fair way to basically address what happens when a county has multiple tax rates and doesn't have a single tax rate anymore.
No, I appreciate that, and as you know, I would be curious about the impact of disparity grant and tried to follow your, and I got a little tied up with the 2.8 and then, so I don't know that I quite followed it, but I'll just listen to the conversation and hopefully something will click. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
You might be listening for a while.
Yeah.
It is a lot. Does it, there were some provisions at one point with regard to to receiving the disparity grant for counties that raised their income piggyback to 3.2. They were able to become disparity counties, as I recall. I feel like Washington was one of them. So if you have multiple rates, you aren't at 3.2 for everyone anymore, and you could never average to get 3.2. So what's the logical solution to that?
So the solution that was offered here is as long as the rate on income under $100,000 is at least 3.1%, and the rate on income over $100,000 is at least 3.2%, you would be treated like those counties that are at 3.2%.
I see. Okay. Senator Erickson?
But that doesn't average out.
That's right.
That doesn't average out, and it's going to give more counties an opportunity to be disparity counties if you did it that way, right?
Well, if you're going from a flat rate at 3.2%, and a county comes in with a rate, has multiple rates, and one of them's below 3.2%, there is no way, I don't think, to average it to 3.2%. Just mathematically, you couldn't do it. So this was a solution that was offered to allow counties to get close to that 3.2% number.
How many counties
Yeah.
theoretically could be affected?
So there are currently 10 counties that receive the disparity grants.
Yes.
7 of the counties are at 3.2% right now. So they're already at the 3.2% amount. That's Baltimore City, Caroline, Dorchester, Prince George's, Somerset, Washington, and Wycomico. There are 3 counties that are disparity grant counties that are below the 3.2%. That's Garrett, that's at 2.65%, Cecil at 3%, and Allegheny at 3.05%. So in
Go ahead.
in theory, I don't think it's practical to think that the counties that are currently at 3.2% are going to be able to reduce their taxes in order to have a number that's below 3.2%. So it's those 3 counties, I think, that we're talking about here that could potentially raise their income tax to 3.2% on some subset of income to get to that that higher disparity number.
Do you remember the conditions? And again, it was just my memory that you could jump into the disparity category if you were at 3.2, but obviously that wasn't the condition totally, because you've got 3 counties that aren't at that level. I think we were trying to help some counties get into position at some point.
So in order to even get into the position of receiving a disparity grant, your per capita income tax revenue, calculated at a rate of 2.54%, must be at least 75% of the state average county per capita income tax revenue when you calculate it 2.54%. So that's why Anne Arundel County doesn't even qualify, even though they're at the 3.2%. Is there a county that doesn't meet that initial threshold of needing a disparity grant? So first you need to meet the threshold, and then you get into the calculation of the grant piece of it. And that's what we're talking about, is calculating that grant piece of it.
But what was it, who was the subset that bumped up because they then decided to go to 3.2?
So that would be, well, I don't know when these counties made the decision to go to 3.2. I just know which counties are at 3.2.
But why weren't they, I guess what I'm trying to figure out was, were they not qualified before? Or did they, I mean, do you know what I'm saying? I mean, they had to be part of, I mean, they were already lower than 75%, right?
Right.
Then why didn't they just automatically go in? Why did they, because I remember we were looking for effort from some counties, and that's why I went to 3.2. Are they just not, does anybody understand what I'm asking? Senator Eckert?
I thought it had to do with education funding initially. That's when, like, Comic Co up those, when we were on appropriations, and then last year, the year before, Carolina and Dorchester up theirs because they wound up with more funding assistance. And I thought it had to do with education. I thought there was some incentive with education funding.
Looks
That's all I
like
can
Erica is
recall.
shaking her head.
A number of years ago, you might be thinking of I believe it was 2010 or 2012, the maintenance of effort law
Yeah.
was done, and it created,
That's right.
we called it an escalator, but it was, there was provisions in there that if the tax effort for education purposes so that did cause a couple of counties to raise their rates, but that's not related to disparity grants.
Right.
So there was nothing about these rates
No.
that related to the disparity?
No, that bill was completely in the context of maintenance of effort.
That's,
And it didn't require, it didn't necessarily require rates to raise. It was kind of a flow-through effect. Some counties decided to in order to not.
I guess we must have played with the rate a little bit. I mean, I remember specifically Washington County was right on the edge. And we must have just played with that 2.54, is that what you said?
Yeah, 2.54 is the threshold to get into the disparity grant.
You have to be at least 2.5.
No, you have to be 2.6 to get to your bottom rate. The 2.54% is how you calculate your per capita income tax revenues.
You have a 2.6 so to get in.
Yeah.
Did you have a question?
Yeah, it was just a question, how much money is at stake in disparities right now? I don't know off the top of my head.
Got that budget analysis.
Oh, I have it. I have it in my other file. I have it, you know.
You've got?
Yeah, I have it. 76 million.
76 million, okay. And the, nobody may know the answer to this, but in the absence of adding this amendment, what would happen?
So I talked to the AG about that because it then creates an ambiguity in the disparity grant calculation. So it would be up to the Department of Budget and Management to determine how the calculation works. One scenario would be that the Department of Budget and Management could decide to use a blended average for the counties that have multiple rates. Another could be that they just take whatever the top rate is for the counties that have multiple rates. The issue is that the statute just does not contemplate the possibility of a county having.
It came in after we went away from graduated
Yeah.
local income taxes. Gotcha, okay, thank
This
you.
is another fine mess you got listening to all this.
No, I was out of the country during that period, to tell you the honest. I really was.
Senator McCray.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I guess the question is for Matt. So my jurisdiction came in because of the bracketed part of it, I guess, is why they were supportive of it. We're already at 3.2%. The question is, how does this affect the disparity grant funding if we were to lower the tax rate on some to utilize that bracketed part?
So since Baltimore City's at 3.2%, and Baltimore City wanted to take advantage of a bracketed basis, they're already at the highest rate they can go. So Baltimore City couldn't go any higher. They could make a lower rate. And if they wanted to make a lower rate but still maintain the biggest calculator for purposes of the amount of their disparity grant, their bottom rate would have to be at least 3.1% on income that's under $100,000. So that's as low as they could go with their bracketed basis. As long as they stayed within that parameter.
0.1%.
This is
Yeah.
the implications of the bill as amended.
They would be able to maintain they're at the 75% calculation. So that would allow them to stay at the 75% calculation if they dropped it 0.1% on income under $100,000.
Got it.
Any other questions? Senator Eckert.
Is Anne Arundel County the only county that's interested in this?
No, I believe there were other counties that testified in addition to Anne Arundel County.
The city of Baltimore.
Yeah, the city of Baltimore.
Senator Griffith.
Exposing my lack of understanding. Does this only impact individual filers, or does it have a business impact?
It doesn't affect the corporate income tax. It only affects individual filers. Those individual filers could be receiving money from a pass-through entity. In that regard, it could impact a passive, if you're talking about business income.
Correct.
Somebody who has a sole proprietorship,
Yes.
they would file as an individual.
Right.
So it would impact that type of income, as
Right.
it currently does.
Right, okay. Thank you.
Pass-through entities could have multiple owners.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Are you still on, Senator McCray?
Clarification, Mr. Chair.
Please.
So they said who came in to support, so Baltimore City supported it as introduced. With the amendments, 0.1%, it's not that much happening in Baltimore City at this point, because we would be losing money if we went under the
That is
0.1%. So I just wanted to say that, just for clarification, put that out there. We supported it as introduced.
Senator Roosevelt.
Yeah, I mean, that's an important distinction here. As introduced, it allowed you to go up as well as to go down if you were at the top rate, and that's a Baltimore City situation. As amended, it would allow counties that aren't at the top rate for anybody right now to go up, but not take it up on everybody, that's the big new thing here. And then counties, whether they're top rate or not, they could lower their taxes for folks at lower income levels. That's as amended. That's the essence of the bill. I mean, that's why it's essentially, That's it.
Yep, that's correct. Okay. Anybody having any feelings about this? Good. Do you want to?
Sorry?
Do you want to vote, or do you want to try to see if we've got the votes? It's up to you. Maybe members want to talk to their counties.
Yeah,
Yes, Senator.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, in light of the fact that we're seeing the amendments and these options for the first, I'd like to talk to the county about.
It's not that it's not complicated.
Yes, it's, my county might not follow it, so I,
Right.
thank you.
Okay, very good. So we're holding this until,
We figure out how it works.
yeah. Oh, Senator Zucker?
Thank you. I was looking, it's always a dangerous thing to look at what the House has done, but I was looking at the House bill. Ours is in a different posture, I guess, right?
So the amendments that we initially talked about last week would put the Senate bill in the same posture as the House bill.
Okay.
The question regarding the disparity grants didn't come up until after the House had sent their version of the bill over, and that's when the Attorney General was contacted regarding their interpretation. And so this amendment was prepared because it was assumed the legislature would want to make clear how the disparity grant calculation would work and not leave it to DBM. And so that's why we have this additional amendment that wasn't considered by the House.
Okay, so we're on hold. Go check with your folks. Let's think about having on the agenda for Friday. 259.
Senate Bill 259 is the Department of Transportation Grant Anticipation Revenue Vehicle Bonds. It alters the calculation of the debt limit for the Garvey bonds. This would allow the department to use the Garvey bonds more as a revolving loan fund as opposed to just the authorization that had been in place for a number of years.
Senator McCray?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to let you know I hadn't been sitting on my hands since we had this last conversation. I've actually talked to the department, been coordinating with the House, got a good understanding of what projects they're trying to utilize with this fund, getting the amendment drawn up, which I also make sure to bring past you, but I was on the phone with the amendment person as we were walking here. So if we could hold it maybe for a day, he said he'd have it to me by this evening.
Okay, so we'll talk about this tomorrow. 362.
Senate Bill 362 is the highway user revenue bill that we discussed a few weeks ago. There isn't a reprint on your desk, but I think the last time we discussed this, it was decided it was probably easier to look at it as far as three charts as to what's going on here. If you recall, there is a the highway user revenues are split currently 7.7% to Baltimore City, 1.5% to the counties, 0.4% to the municipalities. Well, that's what it reverts to in 2025. There's some concern about what that number should be after 2025. So you've got three charts in front of you. The chart number 2 is if you just continued what is current law. So current law is the current distribution is 8.3% to the city. Counties get 3.2%. Municipalities get 2%. If you carried that out into the future and made that indefinite, the chart on number 2 is what that would look like. The bill, as introduced, has Baltimore City going to 8.8% and the municipalities going to 2.6%. Chart number 3, also called exhibit number 4, shows you what that scenario would look like. And chart number 1, which is current law and what is currently planned, would have the distributions beginning in fiscal '25 going to 7.7% for Baltimore City, 1.5% for the counties, and 0.4% for the municipalities. So just to recap, Chart 3 is the bill as introduced. Chart 2 is current practice. If you just carried current practice forward, that's what it would look like. And Chart 1 is what the current law is scheduled to do.
So, if we do nothing, we can do nothing for 2 years. We could, because it'll play out for the next couple of years at the Chart 2 level.
Correct.
And then after 2 years, the 2 years or 3 years? Fiscal 20.
It's after fiscal 24, 25.
It's probably 3 years, right?
Yep.
So, the question is, do we want to carry it out? So the continuation only goes to 26, though. Is that right?
No, well, that's where the chart goes. You could make the continuation go as long as you want it to go.
Right.
That's just how
So
the chart
what
is
does the
prepared.
bill say about the continuation? Does it make that?
The bill would put Chart 3 in place in perpetuity.
In perpetuity. Questions? Senator McCray.
Quick comment, Mr. Chair. Just while I know that doing nothing was discussed and what that would look like if we did nothing, obviously with chart number 2 is the one that this body passed out last year. So I just wanted to also.
Did what?
This body passed out. We removed the sunset last year. It didn't make it through the House. So this body right here actually passed the bill. It just didn't have enough time to get through the House of Delegates. And we removed the sunset is what we did last year.
I think, that's my inclination, since we already went down that road. No pun intended. What's that? We just take number 2, which ends in 24. No, you can't look at the chart. Don't think about the out years. Think about that chart 2 ends in 24 and would resume at the lower levels that are in chart 1. Right? So basically is a loss of revenues if we do not get rid of the sunset. The bill says get rid of the sunset and up the numbers. And has the House moved on this at all?
Not the last time I checked, which was a few days
Yeah.
ago.
We can do whatever we like, but I think our odds on are, if we, unless I don't know something that somebody else knows, maybe the subcommittee chair does, that just continuing what we suggested last year might be the way to move forward. Senator McCray.
I just wanted to make sure that the municipalities, obviously, I think everybody know it, but just to say it, obviously, they will want the increase, but the posture of the body was last year, at a minimum, removing that sunset. So we know where the municipalities are. They want more money, and to be restored back to a level that was there, I want to say 2010, 2011. I can't remember the exact year.
Right. And there's always been this debate about whether that was sort of guaranteed. that they were, then the municipalities and all have suggested that that was what they were due. I think that, you can look on, I'm not sure there's ever a guarantee with any of these charts and funding levels, but obviously we want to help out. But, Senator?
Yeah, I mean, I'm perfectly comfortable just going with extending the sunset and not going with the increase now, particularly because, I'm going to say this again, there was this big federal legislation passed that's providing all kinds of money to counties and to municipalities.
Yep.
And now, in the next year, there's going to be a big infrastructure plan at the federal level.
Yep.
So I'm not sure this is the time that we need to increase this formula.
Yeah, I neglected to mention that. I think you're absolutely right. I think we are going to see a fair amount of money from the Fed. Senator Corderman?
Yeah, Mr. Chair, thank you. Just for historical perspective, because I'm unaware, I apologize for my time not being here in 2010, 20. What were the numbers back then? Any idea as far as what the percentages were? You always hear about the numbers, they were, reduced, and this is restoring them, but is it restoring them fully, or what were the numbers back a decade ago? Does anybody know?
I don't know.
Not offhand. They've varied over the years. I know, was it 2008, 2009? There was transfers to the general fund, and these numbers were reduced, then they were raised. I don't know off the top of my head what the percentage splits were. I do know that they were not consistent for a number of years.
Senator Eckert?
Yes, this is nowhere near restoration for the rural areas. And my other question was, there's nothing stopping the counties now from using some of the relief money for infrastructure. So roads that have been out of repair for a long time, this could go to that. I mean, their money could go to that if they choose, right?
Yes. Have you all seen the charts on those, on what all the locals are getting?
Yes.
I don't know if everybody's seen them. We'll get them around. Just so, everybody gets something. The smaller ones get, in the 100,000 range, but towns like New Market get 600,000. Mount Rainier, 6.8 million.
Yep. Dorchester County
Cambridge gets 10.3.
Yep, we get 19 million for Dorchester, yeah.
Well, that's the other thing. You also, there's the town money, and then there's also the county money. As you said, Dorchester gets 6.2. But in total, the counties get 1.7 billion.
Yep.
And the municipalities in total get 588 million. So yeah, there's a lot of money coming in. And as Senator points out, there's going to be an infrastructure bill, presumably, that follows, if they can keep moving things through the Congress. So, I'll make the motion that we stick with Chart 2, which is we would get rid of the sunset, so it'll go out until it sort of in perpetuity. And obviously, we can have the opportunity to change things as time moves on. Okay? Any questions, thoughts? All those in favor? Unanimous. Senate Bill 413.
Senate Bill 413 is the Maryland Legal Services Corporation funding abandoned property. This bill increases the amount of money that gets distributed each year from the abandoned property fund to the Maryland Legal Services Corporation fund. The amount of money is currently $2 million a year. This would increase the amount that gets distributed from the abandoned property fund to $8 million a year.
So, I'm not sure we're going to vote on this today, but I wanted to bring it up, and we will vote on it by the end of the week, I hope. But I wanted to point out sort of what's going on out there. And what's going on is that we have this bill, and there are bills in JPR that raise the fees. I think it's called a summary ejectment, that essentially is fees for landlords who want to get an eviction. And to lay the foundation for all of this, Maryland Legal Services, and I think you've all heard certainly me talk about it before, but they provide civil right to counsel in a lot of areas. Evictions is one of them, domestic violence, child support. There's a whole series of issues that they take up, and the way they take it up is money is put in this fund for Maryland Legal Services, and then they distribute to a number of nonprofits across the state, many of all in your jurisdictions, that then in turn actually provide the legal services to individuals who need that. So what has happened is that they have three separate sources of funding. Something called IOLTA, which has to do with interest rates, where they used to get $6.5 million on average, filing fees, where they were getting $12.8 million, and the abandoned property, where they were getting $2 million. So essentially, they're getting about $21 million. The projections now, because interest rates are so low and there's no really sign of them going up, is, and then the whole lineup, if you will, everything's kind of down except for the abandoned properties, is about 12 million. So they're about $10 million under going into the next fiscal year in providing these services. So I believe they're critical services. I believe that on multiple levels for the citizens and individuals who receive those services, but also for keeping the court system moving appropriately. The courts report all the time how difficult it is when someone comes in unrepresented. So we got all that going. And now we've got the whole eviction issue, which we believe once the moratoriums on that are going to be exacerbated, more people are going to need representation as they're dealing with their landlords in difficult situations because of what COVID has created. So there's the main bill over in JPR is a bill that the Attorney General put together that basically increases that filing fee, and it increases it pretty significantly because it's at $15 now, and I think in their bill it goes up to $120 if I'm not mistaken. So it could generate a fair amount of money, and my hope is that we can find some sort of middle ground maybe of putting some increase in from the abandoned property fund and also potentially supporting an increase in the fee for filing for evictions, and together that we can get to a pretty good place where there'll be a fair amount of representation out there for those who need it. Anybody have any questions about what I just said? Senator Eckert.
Thank you very much. How much is in that fund now?
The abandoned property fund?
Yeah.
I mean, it's a lot. It's
Like-
one that flows too.
Right, but I mean ballpark, because I couldn't find it in the fiscal note.
I think it's probably 100 and something million.
Oh, so there's plenty of money in there.
Oh, there's
but-
plenty of money.
Okay.
So just so you understand, when the money is generated from the abandoned property, ends up in the fund, that fund on an annual basis then moves into the general fund. So it effectively acts as general fund money. Okay. Senator Peters.
Is there a reason you don't want to move it now? They do a lot
Well,
of...
I'd like to get, so I'm still working with JPR.
Okay.
And I'd like to get a number that, where we don't go overboard, right? That we're getting to a good place between the two. I talked to Senator Smith this morning. We were hopeful to talk right after session, but of course that went longer than we thought. So
They do a lot of really good work in our county, and so I'll be a co-sponsor.
okay, great. Anybody have any other questions? Does anybody have any, because it's not in our committee, but it raises a significant amount. So if it goes from 15 to 110, which is just slightly less than what was in the bill, it raises about 228. I think it raises about $58 million, which is, if you look at this budget for legal services, which was 21 before, a pretty dramatic increase. Now, mind you, they believe that at least half of that is going to be needed to deal with what's going on with the eviction world right now. And the question that that we'll have, and I actually appreciate any feedback from the committee as I talk with Senator Smith, is since it is a substantial increase in a fee, I'd like to know if anybody has any thoughts about that as I sort of negotiate with him on the combination of the two programs to try to accommodate what we're doing. Senator Eckert. Folks who are filing for eviction, filing to evict tenants.
Sort out who
Landlords.
Yeah, because there's some other.
Yeah, and there are all kinds of landlords, and this is sort of part of the complication too.
Correct.
Right?
Some of the
right.
landlords down our way have
That's right.
not been held harmless. I mean, they haven't had a lot of help because, and the issue is, if you get behind in your payments and you've been behind before COVID,
Yep.
that gets blurry within COVID.
Absolutely.
And then if the money goes directly to the tenants and they don't pay the landlord, but we've never directed the money to the landlords
So I
to
believe
pay it.
Yeah, so I believe much of what the administration is doing is directing the money towards the landlords.
So that would be a
And I'm talking about the relief money that we have both from federal dollars and money that we included in our own relief package.
Yeah, that's a big piece of the puzzle. Thank you.
Senator McCray.
First, thank you, Mr. Chair. I guess this looks like it goes into a perpetuity, raising it from the 2 to the 8.
That is correct.
The second piece is that I think everyone is having a tough time in this economy, and I think that you recognize that already, and you've also recognized that there are different types of landlords. So while I think that the fee is inevitable, I think that as you're having a conversation with JPR, just being mindful of what that fee is that's going to be increasing on small landlords is the ones that I'm concerned about because they've been taking a beating on this thing too. And imagine if you got 1, 2 homes, didn't really know what you were getting into, and you wouldn't be able to, that person can stay in that house for at least the last year for that standpoint. And then I just also like to recognize we all have different laws in our local jurisdictions. So when you talk about removing someone in Baltimore City, it still takes about 4 months. So we have an extra month on top of Baltimore County or our surrounding jurisdictions in reference to the eviction process. So just wanted to recognize that piece. I think that raising up the fee is going to be inevitable. What that fee looks like, we should really be considerate and thoughtful about that.
Now, I'll tell you, one of the things that has been talked about, and you can feel, in 2 different directions on this about this, but some of the thought is that it will, in particular for the larger landlords who have been, who some will claim, use the low $15 fee as almost a way to the $15 they would say doesn't mean that much to the larger, if you've got 1,000 units or whatever, that you'll just set the eviction stuff into motion very quickly. And the hope is that by raising the fee, some people say, it will slow that action down. So there'll be fewer sort of immediate, if you call it maybe less thoughtful evictions where there's been no attempt to really negotiate with the tenants and try to make things happen. That probably isn't clearly the case with a smaller landlord, but just it is a thought that is out there. Senator Quarterman.
Thank you. Just following up on some of the other statements of the colleagues, I think it's important to keep in mind, as we said, the smaller places, as our friend from Baltimore City said, I think it cuts both ways, though. It's not necessarily just, the eviction process. I mean, it really, though, comes back to the need for rental assistance. So it's the one side of the kind of the moratorium we're trying to put on evictions, but really the reality is providing rental assistance. And I think that's the key thing that gets lost here. I think with raising that rate, that much, I just don't think it, at the end, it's going to get passed on. I mean, we all know that. And then is it really doing more harm than good as far as, what the actual really need is. So I know there's a lot of challenges within that, but just like our friend on the Eastern Shore, I know in Western Maryland, we've heard a lot of things about this as well, especially on the smaller landlords, because that's typically what we have in those areas. So thank you.
So with the last two stimulus packages, which have not, of course, been spent yet, there's somewhere in the nature of $800 million for rental assistance, just so you're aware that it's out there, and should be processed over time. Senator King.
Yeah, just on the small owner renter side of this thing, the phenomenon that we're seeing it's in Montgomery Village, I'm sure it's all over, but probably 8 to 10 years ago, we had a lot of people that came in and bought townhouses and bought a lot of the real estate up to rent out because they could make big money on it. And it ended up where they were not keeping up with things, and the general quality of these homes went down. Well, now, just within the last 6 or 8 months, all these people are selling those homes and getting out from underneath it, and there is a whole lot less as far as a rental market goes, because people are buying these homes again. There's such a small just amount of houses to sell, but I think that's a lot of these slumlords, as we call them, are selling back off again, which I think is a great thing.
Okay, unless anybody has anything else on it, we'll move on from that. I just want to put in the back of everybody's mind too, though, just so they understand sort of the full picture of this. The rental assistance part is one that we talk about a lot, but there's a lot of other stuff that Maryland Legal Services does or funds beyond that. And as I said, they're $10 million short in their budget on that, which is a 50% cut in their budget right now. So just something to keep into mind. Senator Stallings.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So that money that you were saying, how much, what was that amount again for the renters or the real?
Well, I mean, look, there is the proposal takes it from $15 filing fee up to $120. I think they priced it out over in JPR at $110, and that generated $58 million. They believe that the rental portion, and so what they have in one of their bills is basically splitting half and half. In other words, half going to Maryland Legal Services for both rental and broader, but then they create a separate fund called the Right to Counsel in Evictions, and they put that, the other $29 million in that. And that's what they believe that will be necessary. They've sort of extrapolated out what they expect to be the number of cases for the as we move forward. So,
Thank you.
okay. All right. Very good. Thank you for indulging me on that. I think it's important stuff as we move forward. 240.
Senate Bill 240, this is a departmental bill. This has to do with the resource sharing agreements for the Maryland Department of Transportation. What the bill would do, effectively, it would reverse an action taken on the BRFA a couple of years ago, whereas the revenue from the resource sharing agreements, currently they're going to the Maryland Information Technology Development Project Fund. Under the bill, they would go to, remain with Department of Transportation as they did pre the 2019 BRFA. The value is estimated at about $5 million a year, which would accrue to the Transportation Trust Fund instead of the general fund under the bill.
This administration bill. Anybody all good with this? Okay. All's in favor? Senator Peters? Unanimous? Senator MCCRAY, you got that? Okay, 415.
Senate Bill 415, B&T is secondary on this. This is the bill of the matching funds for the gubernatorial elections. We do have Jared Demarinis from the Board of Elections here again, if there's any questions. Just to summarize again, the bill would set up a new public financing structure for the gubernatorial elections. It would shift the program to a matching fund based on contributions from eligible contributions, which would consist of the eligible contributions are from registered Maryland voters who are individuals. A campaign electing this process would be subject to a maximum of $250 raised from each individual. The matching fund provisions you can see on page 10 of the bill. EHE did amend this, so it would be $8 for each dollar of an eligible private contribution for the first $50 of the contribution. And then under the EHE amendments, it would be $6 for each dollar of the second 50.
So let me jump in here, Matt. So as you may recall, we had a pretty spirited discussion about this last time. There's some policy changes. Our portion is the money portion. We talked about funding both primary and general. The way they've sent it over to us, correct me if I'm wrong, is that really there's $3.8 million in the fund right now, which theoretically would be used for the primary purposes, and then the bill adds an additional $4 million that would be used for the general. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. So that's how it stands. It doesn't increase it anymore. I mean, I actually talked about the potential for increasing it some more to match up numbers for the general and the primary and the general. But I think we're just going to take it as is unless someone has other questions. Senator Young.
Couple of questions. Is there a limit on how much one candidate can get?
There is a limit of $3 million per campaign, each for the primary and the general. And I believe it's, Jared, correct me if I'm wrong, I think it's half if they're unopposed.
Okay.
I think he's muted.
I think it's a third.
Sorry, okay, a third.
It's a third in the primary?
If they're page 10, if they're unopposed, it's 1/3 of the amount, so it'd be limited to 1 million. And that's just the state funds, the state matching funds. The candidate can still raise money, but the state's only going to match up to those amounts based on the formula for the matching.
There's no limit on how much a candidate can raise?
Except for the fact that they can only raise $250 maximum per contribution.
250? So what if someone's already raised a lot of money and has more than 250?
Well, those,
Well,
yeah.
this is a voluntary program, Senator, if you don't mind. So they would have to establish a separate gubernatorial ticket in order to participate in this program here. So we've worked with other campaigns in the past to either they freeze their old account or we move some money over, or whatever they can do. But this would be modeled after what the counties have been doing successfully in Montgomery County, and
But I still want to understand.
move forward to Howard.
A candidate could have 2 campaign accounts, one to get money here and another one to get whatever he wanted, or she wanted.
No, they would, the other campaign account, if the non-publicly funded campaign account would just be frozen in order and could not be used at all for the electoral season, and most likely would be shut down.
Okay, just pick a number out. Somebody's already raised $4 million. Now they want to get this money. So they freeze the $4 million account and can't use it?
Right, they wouldn't, I mean, at that point there, they probably wouldn't join into the program. But yes, if they wanted to, they would have to freeze that money because that was raised outside of the limits and outside of the constraints of the program.
So
They couldn't use it for the current election cycle.
So they just would hold that money.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear that.
Senator Young asked if, so then that money would just be held in that account. Maybe they lose, maybe they run for something else in another election. They could use that for that purpose.
Correct, yes, right. They can use that for another election, right, yes, later on.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Yes, Senator Edwards.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just for clarification, a little more from my part, you mentioned 3 million, I think, a maximum amount, and then you talked about 250 for a couple times. So let's talk in simple terms here. How much does a person that wants to get in this program, I'm going to call it, how much skin in the game do they have to put in this thing to get money? What is it now?
To get the maximum of 300,000, or to enter into the program?
Wait a minute. What is it now, and what would it be under here? So if I wanted to get in this program and wanted to try to get the maximum, how much money, skin in the game, will I have to raise to be eligible to get the maximum 3 million?
So right now, I believe you need to raise 10% to enter the current program, which has an expenditure cap. Under this, you have to have at least 1,500. This is on the bottom of page 7. At least 1,500 eligible private contributions, totaling at least $120,000.
And so what's the 250 you mentioned a couple times?
So the 250 is the amount that you can receive from any individual contributor.
And that becomes a 1-for-1 match all the way up to 3 million.
Not quite a 1-for-1. It accelerates. It's weighted to lower amounts, and that formula is on page 10. So the first 50 under the EHE amendments would get matched $8 per $1. The next 50, $6 per $1. The third 50, $2 per $1, and then 151 to 200, there's no match. Or 151 to 250, there's no match.
Okay. All right. Yes.
I apologize, I was out for a bill hearing, so I'm a little behind here, but I know the bill in general now, after we talked about it the other day. I want to understand how the money that is in the account now and the money that would be added by this bill, is that money or part of that money guaranteed for the general election, regardless of how many people try to take down money in the primary?
I mean, I don't think the money's actually available logically until, is that right, the 4 million extra would have to be for the general, right?
The 4 million is
Correct.
a fiscal '23 appropriation, so that would only be available for the general election,
So the 4 million is only for the general.
plus
And I
whatever's
thought-
left over,
I'm sorry?
plus whatever may be left over.
Well, that's kind of where I'm going with this. I'm trying to understand that.
Yep.
And so I thought 3 million for each candidate was a number that I remember from someplace for the general. Is
That's
that
the
wrong?
maximum any campaign can receive in the primary and the general,
Under the bill,
under the bill.
as well as under current law.
Current law, the way it works is it's an expenditure cap. So
Right.
current law, what you're getting is
But
Jerry,
what's the
correct me if I'm wrong,
maximum?
is what you can spend. Under this, the state would match up to 300 million, but a campaign could still bring in contributions provided they're under
Above
250
that.
per contribution.
Okay. I mean, I guess my concern is, I mean, the whole system is too screwed up for us to fix today, in my judgment. But I'm just concerned that we try to make sure that we have the maximum amount of money available for the general. And the primary, I think, is going to be, can be all screwed up. We can't predict how it's going to go. We have a lower, this bill will give a lower threshold to get into the program, so that presumably might bring more candidates into the program. So basically, so I understand it now, you're saying that if we adopt the bill, there's guaranteed
4 million.
up to 2 million each for the candidates in the general? Is that the way to think about it?
No, couldn't one sort of accelerate their contributions to ensure they got the 3, and the other one would be just based on the timing of how they
Yeah, that's
brought
what I
money in?
understand.
Is that accurate?
Right, so so the $4 million that was appropriate would be for the general election. And then as people would, in the general, if, now you have a smaller number of candidates that would be applicable for this, as they file campaign finance reports, they would draw down that $4 million till one of them either hits $3 million, so that, at that point there, then that candidate would be capped.
So one candidate would end up with 3 million, and the other could end up with 1 million or less.
Well, it all depends upon how much money that they raise.
No, I understand that. I understand that.
But we also have the money, whatever unspent money from the primary gets moved over into the general as well.
If
The
there is
4
any.
million guarantees at least one candidate is going to be fully funded, plus additional $1 million as a buffer if another candidate, if a third-party candidate so inclined to participate as well.
And this applies in the general election to any candidate who is filed for governor. Is that correct?
Correct.
Thank you.
Senator Zucker.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. So just so I can get some clarity here. So our charge right now and what we have in front of us is whether or not we want to accept the budget piece that will make sure that we have public financing for the general election this next time around.
That is
That-
accurate.
that is the
From
question.
my perspective, that's correct.
So the answer would be, I mean, it's a political, I mean, it's a more of a personal question for us, but I would say that if you support public financing and you want to make sure it's funded in this next general election, then you'd want to move for adoption of this.
Senator Peters.
Continuing on that thought, he voted on this, correct?
Correct.
Yeah.
And what was the vote? Do we know, Philip?
It was 9-2.
Okay, so continuing with Senator Zucker, I think, we got a committee that's already moved forward, and I think, at least my perception is we just need to decide if we're going to fund it or not. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Yes. Senator Young.
I still want to understand something on fairness. There's 4 million for the general election. One candidate could raise 3 million. Is that correct?
One could get access to 3 million. That is
One
correct.
could get access to 3 million. And then you said something about a third candidate getting 1 million. Well,
So,
then either the Democrat or the Republican doesn't get any. If the third candidate gets 1 million and 3 goes to either the Democrat or the Republican that raised the money the fastest.
So, yes, Senator, I mean, no matter how many candidates there are, so if there's the two candidate normal sense or a third-party candidate, the money is the money. Everyone dips into it based on their own fundraising. So any of the candidates in it are eligible to get as much as they possibly can with a hard stop of it either being completely used up or somebody gets $3 million and then there's the remainder.
Okay, I used to run track. When's the gun get fired? I mean, if we're going to have a race to see who gets the money and who doesn't, when's the starting date?
Good point. Well, good question. Yeah. When does it start for the general? Does it start the day after the primary that the fundraising begins, that the qualifications occur?
Yeah, I believe that's correct. I believe the season for the general starts, I think that's this year, that'd be the first day of the fiscal year, correct?
And for the primary, they could start yesterday?
Yes.
As soon as the filing is open, I guess. Is that correct?
The filing is open right as soon as they open up a gubernatorial ticket committee, they could start fundraising into it. Yes.
Now, in terms of what somebody's already raised, could they take all the contributions, 250 and less, and move them over to this other account and just freeze the big contributions?
No, because that campaign was not established under Title 15. So you have to establish a gubernatorial ticket committee first.
Okay. But I have another fundraising entity. So I now file for governor. Can I move the contributions to the first one that were 250 or less over to the gubernatorial campaign committee?
No, because you have to establish the campaign finance entity first. Then you can fundraise into it.
Okay. So anything previous is out of the question. Just want to make sure of that. Okay, thank you.
Senator Alford.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think obviously so much of this is a guessing game, but I think it's highly unlikely that we're going to come to a general election where both candidates are going to utilize this public financing. I don't see that as particularly likely. Talking with Jared, and thank you to him for walking me through the bill, we think more likely that a scenario is going to come about where people are drawing down $2 million is probably the average we're going to see here. But two things remain. We have a current public financing law that is not a best practice, and we have $3.8 million in that account. If we don't do anything, we're still going to likely run out of money. This is a better practice. It's nationally, other states have done it this way. We're going to need some amount of money. If in an ideal world we put $10 million into this account, but we're trying to be reasonable here. And $4 million will see that this goal is accomplished, this policy goal is accomplished. So that's why I'll be voting yes. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Senator Solling.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to know one thing, and probably it's really easy, but I don't understand it. It says in FYI 2023 and 2026, it's established a mandate. Why just at that time when others are giving like $2 million? Why is that?
So the bill has a mandate for 23 for the next general election, and then the bill also requires going forward for each election for enough money to be in the fund to fund 2 primary candidates at the maximum, so that'd be a total of $6 million, and at least 1 gubernatorial general election ticket at $3 million. So moving forward, there will be funding mandates for future elections.
And that's just for the gubernatorial?
Just for the gubernatorial.
Thank you.
Senator, where's the pep? Yes. We'll wrap this up soon.
Absolutely. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I am going to vote for this because I think we do need to deal with the general election. I think it's a screwed up mess, though, and I don't think this is improving the system dramatically. I think it's dealing with the problem for next year. I actually, with respect, disagree with my Anne Arundel colleague. I don't think this new formula is a best practice at all. It's going on in a bunch of places, but I've seen how it's gone in some places, and the reality is it rewards those with big direct mail lists. That's who it rewards, and that You can pick zip codes, and I've seen zip codes, where you identify who gives small donations in the mail. It's not every zip code in the state. It's not diverse. It's not inclusive. It will drive both parties, in my judgment, to very narrow constituencies if it gets to scale. I think we've seen that in some other places. I think this takes a lot more thought, and I'm glad this is only through this next election. I think I'm a big supporter of public financing. I've been for public financing for my entire career. But I want it to work the way we've done it in Maryland. It hasn't worked. And I don't think this is going to make it work. I think it will stagger through the next election, and somebody may use it, somebody may not use it. But in terms of the point of public financing is to make campaigns and candidates dependent on the people they represent. I don't think this goes in that direction. But I will vote for the short-term importance of it.
Senator Zucker?
I just move the bill as amended.
Okay. All those in favor? Well, how about that? Unanimous. Right. This isn't EE. All right. 550.
Senate Bill 550, you all are secondary.
Thank you, Jared. Thank you.
You all are secondary on this. The bill would establish the Sheila Hickson Behavioral Health Services Matching Grant Program. It would be used, the program that would be used to provide behavioral health services for veterans and relatives of veterans. It authorizes up to $2.5 million for the program. It's not a mandate, though.
Any questions? Yes, Senator King.
Can I just say, it's for Sheila's name to be put on this bill is really a special thing, and I think a few of us probably went through all that when her son committed suicide, and we all went through that with her a few years ago, and I just think this is just a really, knowing that how much she would love us doing something like this, I would definitely move favorable on it.
Very good. Senator Rosebeth?
Yeah, I just want to agree with Senator King very, very much. And frankly, I'd like to be added as a co-sponsor.
I would too.
Okay. All right. Anybody wants to be added as a co-sponsor, raise your hand. Looks like everybody.
Everybody? Okay.
Got a motion?
Second.
All those in favor? There we go. Senator King. You got that bill.
EHE is primary.
Oh, you
Or,
don't
I'm
have
sorry,
that bill.
finance is primary.
Nice. Oh, well. It was a nice thought. Yes.
So I think it's important for Senator Salling, you had a bill, just how these two will tie together, we don't need to talk about it today, but they're very similar. So I know there was some, where it's going to be.
The one that we already passed?
Yeah, no. I mean, I'm just saying it was. Yeah, we passed one already, but
Yes.
it was a line item for the Veterans Trust Fund. So
Yes.
how these two could work together, I think, would be very important because we're talking about the same issue, depression and then suicide. So I'll follow up on it. Okay.
Great. Good insight. 741.
741, you all are secondary on this. This is a bill from Finance. This bill has to deal with COVID testing, contact tracing, and vaccination. The relevant pieces for budget and tax, the bill has a number of funding requirements, and I will point you to those. The first one you will see is on page 6. Lines 9 through 11, there's a mandate of $25 million for grants to local jurisdictions for COVID testing and contact tracing. Now, I will clarify, we do have amendments here from Senator Rosebeth in addition to what Finance adopted. And the amendments from Senator Rosebeth specify that anywhere there's a funding requirement, that it shall only consist of federal funds available under any of the federal legislation passed from 2020 through 2022. And then at the end of the bill, there's also an uncodified section, just as a catch-all saying that, implementation of the act shall be used with federal funds.
And I think that's probably enough, maybe, for us to vote on, unless anybody has any particular questions about this. Yes, Senator Griffith. Oh, look at you.
We're favorable with the amendment.
Favorable with the amendments. All those in favor with the amendments, raise your hand. Those opposed? Got it? Okay. Okay, 376, I'll jump right in on this because I know we had lots of chatter about this and wasn't even sure this was going to come back, but I ended up having a good conversation over the weekend. And it turns out that we can make this work, I think, with a single one-time $250,000 general fund mandate. And that's what I believe the amendment does. Is that correct? That's correct. Okay.
Second.
All those in favor of the bill with as amended? Does everybody understand this? You want? So okay, let's take a step back. Remember, this was the money that was coming out of the small minority business. The money that. What's that?
I didn't think we liked it.
We don't. We didn't. And instead of creating a mandate that requires a certain amount of money to come out of that every year, we're doing a one-time mandate, not out of that fund, but out of the general fund for $250,000. And that's enough money, since it's a revolving loan fund, to let this program continue. Did I do a good job with that, Erica?
Excellent. Couldn't have said it better myself.
Okay. Does everybody understand that now? Well, that's the goal of a revolving loan fund. And if it doesn't, then we'll come back and we'll learn something from that, and decide. The question is whether or not you support the concept, which I believe we've all voted for in the past, about having this nonprofit interest-free microbridge loan program. This is just providing for the funding to keep the program going. Now, mind you, it does maintain the provisions of the original bill. I didn't get into all of that. And the provisions of not the original bill, I mean the original law that says that the governor could put money from that fund. But so we're not touching that. All we're doing is putting $250,000 in from the general fund. Okay? We're making no mandates on the fund, though. That seemed to be the real problem as we were going down this road. So this is the solution that we've been able to come up with. Okay, all those in favor? Unanimous. Who loves this? This is a bridge. This is the economic development. You want to do this, Senator Zucker? That's under your committee. Okay. 526.
All right, Senate Bill 526, you guys are secondary, EHE is primary. The amendments that they adopted are in a reprint on your desk, hopefully. What this bill does is it basically partners UB Law School and the UM Law School in an effort to attract diverse students to attend law school from the 4 HBCUs. So it establishes this collaborative between those entities to increase the diversity. The part that pertains to you guys are on page 3 of the bill, which deals with the funding. The amendments by EHE actually decreased the funding from what was originally $450,000 to $250,000. That's page 3, lines 8 and 9 and 10. That would be beginning in '23. And then additionally, the change between lines 11 and 14 is it would require the two schools of law to basically provide a match of up to $125,000. That's the bill.
It's your pleasure. Favorable as amended. All those in favor with amendments? Unanimous. Senator McCray is getting too many bills today. You're starting to look like Senator Elfreth.
That's a compliment.
789.
All right, Senate Bill 789, this has to do, it is a local bill with Baltimore City. You do have a letter of support from the delegation, and they are putting forth amendments, which are on your desk. Essentially, current law, the city of Baltimore needs to appropriate at least 40% of hotel room tax proceeds to support the convention center, basically Visit Baltimore. So namely, firstly, this bill extends that requirement through 2027. The amendments return paragraph 2 from lines 5 through 15 to current law. So essentially, the only change that's happening here is it extends the requirement to provide the funding. And then in terms of calculating what 40% is, it's now going to be looking at the preceding 3-year rolling average of what that 40% would be based on.
And what was it before? How was it calculated before?
Single 1-year look back.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear you.
It was one single year, I believe the prior
gotcha.
year.
Questions? Okay. All those in favor? Senator King? Got it. Thank you. Okay. 841.
All right, Senate Bill 841, this is that solar energy systems bill that I believe it was last week. You have both a reprint on your desk, which is the same reprint as was here last week, plus attached to that reprint is a little snippet from the Climate Now bill that shows the provision in there that deals with the same concept, but differently than in Senate Bill 841. So generally, as a reminder, what 841 does is it authorizes the counties to set a different tax rate for community solar energy generating systems. It also would create a new subclass in order to assess this type of property. And then on page 4 of the bill at the end, it would establish that the assessment would not include any income that would come from that community solar property. So with the climate...
Yeah, Senator King.
Erica, Patty called me on the floor this morning with some amendments. I'm assuming that this reprint has them in it.
Correct.
Is that correct? Okay, thank you.
Yes, and that is referring to the amendments here of changing solar energy property to the community solar energy generating system. So that is in this. So if you
I have
want
no
to...
idea what that means.
I really don't either, frankly. It is a defined term.
Yeah, in the bill, it said solar energy property, and it got changed to community solar energy generating systems throughout the bill.
Which is a defined term, and it's shown on page 2 of the bill. Which I think is probably how this was intended to begin with, because it used that phrase in some cases, but not every case.
Yeah.
So to me, the
Basically,
amendment...
they want to be calling it community solar. Right?
Right.
And community solar means what?
So on page 2, it's a solar energy system. It's connected to the distribution grid. It's located in the same service territory as the subscribers. It's kind of that laundry list of criteria on page 2 of the bill.
So in other words, you get this potential break because you're attached to the grid and you can contribute to the overall health of the community, if you will. And as opposed to it just being on top of your house where it would just be benefiting you.
Yep.
Okay?
If you wanted to, since this was the question last time, kind of do a side-by-side.
Yep.
So bill page 3 of your reprint, it's lines 11 through 21. And that corresponds with the bracketed part in the single page at the end of that. That's in the Climate Now bill. So both of them are exempting personal property taxation for county and municipal corporations. There is no state personal property tax. If it's installed on rooftops, parking garages, roadways, you can see Climate Now includes brownfield sites. The other difference is Climate Now is more narrowly tailored in terms of it needs to have a certain kilowatt hour output going to low or moderate income customers. That narrowness is not in Senate Bill 841. So 841 is just broadly drafted in terms of an exemption. You know, if you don't want to countermand what is in the Climate Now bill, you would just simply make a motion to strike those provisions in Senate Bill 841. And then all 841 would deal with is the assessment and the subclass and the different tax rates.
I'm sorry. Strike, what was that bit about striking? If you want to do what?
Yeah, if you didn't want to, I mean, because, you know, these two provisions conflict, right? If you wanted to leave the Climate Now provisions as is and not conflict with that.
I see.
You know,
So it doesn't, I see.
Then, yeah, the solution is to strike it out of 841 and just go with the other provisions, which do not conflict with Climate Now.
You know what? I'm inclined personally just to let it be. And should those bills really move, it's the kind of conference thing that we'd try to figure out, I think.
Yeah, the other thing to note is let's say they both move all the way through all the steps and both of them land on a governor's desk. The controlling one will be whichever one passed last. So there is a legal assumption there if no action is taken.
I got you. Okay. Moved as, you're raising your hand there, Senator?
Yeah.
Yep.
I thought I knew the answer till you made a comment about on rooftop. So, community solar energy generating system. Is that anything other than like on rooftops and this? Does this count these huge ones that they're building? Are they community solar energy generating systems?
So on bill page 2 with the defined term of community solar energy generating system, it is agnostic as to the location of where they are. The parameters for the location only comes into play with establishing the exemption.
So my understanding was that this doesn't include using like farmland. Is that correct?
I didn't hear that last part, sorry.
My understanding was that it does not include like using farmland.
For the exemption, correct. It has, correct. That would not be, unless it's a brownfield site, then that could be, you know, an open field. But only if they're on rooftops, parking lots, roadways, or brownfield sites. That's the Climate Now bill. Under this bill, only if it's on a rooftop or a structure over a parking garage, surface lot, or roadway. So if it's out in the middle of a farmland field, it would not be eligible for the exemption.
Okay. Got it?
So what is an abandoned surface mine count? Is that a brownfield?
Oh, an abandoned.
Well, the reason I asked is yesterday we got briefed on probably the largest project in the state that's going to be constructed in Garrett County, Mr. Chairman.
Yeah.
$250 million. Huge project, solar panels, substation, the whole 10 yards. And I just want to make sure, because the county's sure going to be looking forward to getting taxes off of that. This isn't going to take anything away from that.
This is authorizing counties, right? Erica?
Yeah, I'm double checking. No. In terms of the exemption, it would be a required exemption. The authorizing part is to do with the assessments and the tax rate. So just to be clear, the climate now is the only one that talks about brownfields. My knowledge of brownfield is limited, but I know that it is like a federal designation in terms of, polluted property that needs to go through some sort of remediation. So if that particular piece of property that you're asking about is a brownfield, that would be a knowable piece of information. I absolutely don't know off the top of my head because it is an official designation.
So, again, in simple terms, would they be able to tax it or not tax it?
Depends on if it's a brownfield zone.
Only if it's a brownfield.
If it is a brownfield zone, then under the Climate Now bill, it would be exempt.
From taxes?
But we're not talking about, we already passed that bill.
Yes, that's.
Under this bill, would it be exempt?
If it's empty land and if you're not going to put solar on a rooftop or on a structure or on a parking garage or a surface parking lot or a roadway, then the exemption would not apply. That was a lot of double negatives there. My apologies.
Senator Alfred?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I know we're moving into the season of lots of different bills in the air, and we're going to have to kind of wait and see, but I know a couple of us have heard from MACO and MML that they would prefer the language that's in the Climate Solutions Now bill, so the amendment that's on the last page, they've expressed to me and a number of us that they would prefer that additional kind of narrowing in this bill. As well as the Climate Solutions bill. I can frame that as a question, but I just.
I hear you.
Okay. Thank you.
Yep. Senator Rosebeth?
Yeah, I'm just curious if someone knows the answer to this. MACO did not object to it being mandatory?
Only MML did. They came out, and MACO was favorable with amendment to strike this part of it.
I'm sorry, they were favorable with?
With amendment to strike this part of it.
Strike which part of it? I'm sorry.
The exemption, the required exemption.
Oh, okay, so MACO was opposed to a mandatory exemption.
Correct.
That seemed logical. And it just strikes me that making it permissive but not mandatory seems like an obviously a good thing to do.
Senator MCCRAY?
Mr. Chair, I hate to pile on, but I just wanted to pile on and lift up what they were saying. My local jurisdiction reached out to me earlier today and just say, hey, this is problematic. Authorized, but not telling us what to do.
Okay. Senator Quarterman?
I would just support my friend from farther western Maryland as far as if we could get some clarification on this whole situation he has going on in his county before we move forward on it.
Let me ask you this, because it'll solve everything, maybe. Is it the desire of the committee to make this permissive? And if it is, raise your hand. Well, that sort of does it right there. It won't matter what the definition necessarily for you, Senator.
Mr. Chairman, this says property tax. There's several classifications of property tax. Is this personal property tax, business property tax, utility property tax?
Personal property tax.
It's personal.
And they take a big side. I don't think it makes any difference. They could tax it, in my view, but I think what was brought up best approach.
Now, it's interesting.
May to shall, or shall to may, rather.
The Climate Now bill is not permissive either, is it?
Correct.
And that's already happened. Okay. I'll entertain a motion.
Move to make it permissive.
Second.
Okay. So with that and the amendment that's already on there, all those in favor? Unanimous.
Okay. So now there will be two definitely conflicting provisions floating around out there to be resolved at some point.
We understand.
Yep.
I mean, we're not going to, if this committee wants it to be permissive, then there's no way of changing that situation. Because it's already out there. Not so in the Climate Now bill. So there's no way we can get around that. Okay. Senator Alford, you like this bill?
She told me she liked it.
All right, we did pretty well today. I think we did good, actually. We're gonna, you got the schedule for the week, everybody, right? We're gonna vote every day. We'll keep moving things forward. Obviously, we're trying to make crossover. You heard the president. We may have 2 sessions on Monday. We may even have to have Saturday session too. Possibly, yes.
He didn't say 2 sessions tomorrow, though, did he?
No, he talked about 2 sessions on Monday.
Okay.
Although I suspect it will be longer, if nothing else. What, do you know something, Erica?
I may have seen an email for Thursday, double session.
Okay. Bottom line is, be ready.
Yeah.
Be prepared.
Yep, and Kim sent to all of your offices kind of everything that the chairman just said for this whole week, including all the Zoom links for the various places you need to be, so.
All right?